How on earth did we get to the world we live in today? I know, it can feel pretty chaotic. But what if I told you that modern history is really just a big story of cause and effect? It's like a chain reaction of ideas, new technologies, and power struggles. So in the next few minutes, we're going to connect those dots and see exactly how we got from there to here. Right. So you can think of modern history as this constant collision between three huge forces: power, ideas, and technology. These three things, they're the real engine of change. And as we're about to see, the way they interact has completely redrawn the map of the world, not just once, but over and over again. Okay, so our story kicks off around the year 1750 with a period so transformative that we call it the Twin Revolutions. Seriously, think of this as the moment the engine for our modern world was built and then switched on for the very first time. So around 1750, the world gets hit by these two massive, simultaneous waves of change. You've got the Industrial Revolution, which completely changed how we make stuff and where we live. And then, at the exact same time, you have these political revolutions, like the ones in America and France that just totally rewrote the rules of power. Now, the Industrial Revolution was so much more than just cool new machines like the steam engine. It was a massive social earthquake. It literally pulled people off of farms and crammed them into cities. It created brand new social classes like the industrial working class, and it sparked these huge conflicts over wealth and inequality that, let's be honest, we're still dealing with today. Meanwhile, those political revolutions unleashed this incredibly powerful new idea. See, instead of just being subjects ruled by some king, people started to believe that a group with a shared identity, a nation, should have its own government and its own country, a state. This simple little formula, believe me, it was going to change the world. So you have these two revolutions, and they've just let these forces out of the box that nobody can control. And in the 19th century, industry and this new idea of nationalism started to collide and compete, and in the process, they completely redrew the global map. After Napoleon was defeated, the old monarchies tried their best to stuff the genie back in the bottle at the Congress of Vienna. But, it was just too late. The idea of nationalism was unstoppable. It led to the creation of powerful new countries like Italy and, maybe most importantly, Germany. And that completely upended the old balance of power. This new industrial power also created this huge, hungry appetite for resources and new places to sell stuff. When you combine that with new military technology, it led to a pretty simple and pretty ruthless logic. Industrial nations use their military advantage to build these vast global empires, colonizing huge chunks of Africa and Asia. Well, this intense competition between industrial empires, it couldn't last forever. You just knew it was going to blow. By the early 20th century, the pressure had built up to a breaking point. The world was about to be plunged into an era of conflict like nothing anyone had ever seen before. The causes of World War I are really a perfect storm of all the forces we've been talking about. And there's a handy way to remember them with the acronym MAIN. You've got militarism building up huge armies, a tangled web of alliances, the scramble for imperial colonies, and, of course, that intense nationalism. Put them all together, and you have a global powder keg just waiting for a spark. And the devastation of that war was followed by a global economic catastrophe, the Great Depression. This period shows us a really dangerous pattern. When you have widespread economic desperation, people can lose faith in democracy and start turning to radical, extreme ideologies like fascism and Nazism. And the result of that extremism was, of course, the Second World War, a conflict that was even more destructive than the first. By 1945, the old world of European dominance was just shattered. And in its place, a whole new global order emerged, one that was dominated by just two rival superpowers. Which brings us to the next chapter of our story. For almost half a century, the world wasn't defined by a direct, hot war between the big powers, but by this tense global standoff we all know as the Cold War. The whole planet was basically split into two camps. On one side, you had the United States and its allies, who were all about capitalism and liberal democracy. And on the other side, you had the Soviet Union and its allies pushing for a world of communism. This ideological rivalry shaped absolutely everything, from global politics to the space race. But while the superpowers were locked in this epic struggle, another huge historical process was happening at the same time. The old European empires were falling apart. Dozens of new countries in Asia and Africa won their independence. But many of them found that even though they were politically free, they were still economically dependent on their former rulers, a situation people started calling neo-colonialism. The collapse of the Soviet Union back in 1991 finally ended the Cold War, and that brings our story right into the present. This is the era we're all living in, a world that's more interconnected for sure, but also way more complex and unpredictable than ever before. Yeah, one of the biggest changes since 91 has been the shift in global power. Right after the Cold War, the world was what you'd call unipolar, basically dominated by the United States. Today, though, we live in a multipolar world, where power is shared among lots of different players, like the US, China, and the European Union. And of course, this new era has brought with it a whole new set of challenges. And these aren't problems that any one country can solve on its own. They're global problems, everything from climate change and pandemics to the rise of AI and growing inequality, and they are defining the historical moment we are in right now. So let's just do a quick recap. The whole story begins with revolution and industry, right? Which then fueled an age of nationalism and imperialism. That fierce competition led straight into world wars and crises, which then gave way to the Cold War and decolonization, and that brings us right to where we are today, an era of globalization and all of its new challenges. See? It all connects. And that brings us right back to now. Those same forces, technology, ideas, and power that shaped the last 250 years, well, they are still hard at work, pushing our world in new directions every single day. So the real question is, what's going to be the next big turning point in this unfinished story of ours?